everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Veterans History Project, brought to you by the Lawrence County Museum. I'm Brad Bough, the Vice President of the Lawrence County Museum. I'm also the Veterans Service Officer for Lawrence County. You'll notice to my right today, it's not Lee Hutchinson, it's Rowena Cross-Najafi, the President of the Lawrence County Historical Society and Museum, and she's here to help me interview today. Rowena, I want to thank you, for being here to help today. And the reason Lee Hutchinson is not right here today is because
he's over there.
He's over there. He's going to be the one we're going to interview and talk to him about his 100th birthday, which is coming up on June the 12th. On the 14th of June, which is Flag Day, very appropriate, we will have a celebration of Lee's 100 years at the First Baptist Church from 1 to 4. Lee, welcome, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you. Glad to be here on time.
We appreciate that.
Well, you have some questions for him, don't you?
Yes. Yeah, because today, the day that we are recording this, is VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, and you were in Europe on that day. That was in 1945.
I found that picture of the flares. What happened was our crew was down, not flying that day, and things were winding down. And we had been under a truce to drop food in Holland and feed the starving Hollanders with 10 and 1 boxes of food. And then we had flown 2 of those during the ceasefire truce. And so that's the reason we had time off to go into the little town of Dis and visit the pub. And we walked in. It was only about 5 miles. We walked in and we were walking home in the dark when the sky just erupted with flares, red and green and all color flares that we had to use on missions as signals, but they were firing all of them. So we knew that they had signed and the war was over. So we ran back, moved as fast as we could. We got back to the base so we could get our pistols and our very pistols and find some flares to shoot. But it was and I did have a picture of that. I do have a picture that we could show sometime. But that was our signal that the war was over. We knew we were going to live a lot longer. We had a future. And so it was no more missions, no more flak, etc. Great day. To be in England, especially.
Where exactly were you assigned at that point in England?
We were in a little town called Dis. We called it I, actually. The I, the title of my first book is Through These Eyes, because we were stationed at Eyes, and I saw it all, and one of my crew members lost his eye. So it was a 3-way, easy way to remember that, title that first book. And it was, everything was in southeastern England in the farmland. Bases were within 10 miles of each other. When planes took off, they had to vary and go know where the other guy was going and be warned. And so I was a beautiful little town, and it's still very active, and the people are still, they remember us so much more than the people in the United States do. Actually, that's the reason I write, is because people here don't know, and they don't teach it in schools. And so I'm just making it available by interviewing all these guys and printing their stories, as well as printing mine. And I learned so much, it's actually become a scholarly thing for me, because I learned so much more about my missions from reading what they did and when they did it.
Yeah, it sort of all fits together.
It all fits together. I found out just after 78 years, I got a hold of a diary of a P-51 pilot. His son gave it to me. Turned out that he had escorted our formation on our very first mission, December the 5th of 1945, 1944.
Incredible.
So things just kind of dovetail together in coincidence after coincidence. My last book, I found out that my future brother-in-law was flying over there doing the same job I did. He'd never told me this.
Really?
And my daughter's future father-in-law was with him in the same outfit.
So your brother-in-law didn't talk about the war at all?
We didn't talk much. He was much older,
Mm.
and I think he went off to Florida or something.
Yeah, because on May the 8th, which is the day we're talking about, 1945, you were not yet 20, right?
Right. Well, yeah,
Almost.
I had just reached 20. Yeah.
You had just reached
yeah.
20.
That
And everybody that you knew there basically was also really, really young.
Yeah.
right?
Well, see, when they dropped the draft age from 21 down to 18, they picked up a slew of teenagers, and guys could get overseas and be fighting at 18. But I lucked out and passed. After I flunked out of the Air Cadet program, then gave you aptitude tests. And I passed the aptitude for radio simply because a Bedford High School teacher had taught a radio class, Mr. Prather. I can always thank him for staying in the States and have. Some of those boys went directly over from basic training to crew training to overseas. Some of them died at 18.
Yeah, your chances of living through the war were increased the longer you could stay here, right?
And then they increased the number of missions. By the time we got there, they increased the number of missions from 25 to 35. That did it again.
10 more chances.
So we really had more. We really had more chances of dying, but we also, the Air Force had more planes and more bombers, more people.
Did you ever run into any of the Tuskegee Airmen in your time as a crew person on a plane, right?
I ran into, from Bedford boys, I ran into Joe Myers a couple of places, and one of the Brock boys. Outside of that, I never saw anybody from Lawrence County.
Really?
We were one way and they went another.
Yeah. I'm sure you're just like ships
The
passing
troop
in the
train
night,
was
right?
a big transportation deal. That's what people don't understand. That trains are what we used to move troops. And they were all over the United States.
Seems like a pretty good way to get around, actually, or it was.
It was then. Yeah.
And speaking of learning things, I just recently learned that at the end of the war, like the last 18 months or so, at some point there was this terrible mail backlog where mail wasn't getting home and mail wasn't getting to you. Do you remember any of that?
No, our mail came through.
Did it? That's interesting because there's a whole new movie out about that. That's kind of
well. The problem is it wasn't hand mail or envelope mail. It was V mail. And they took you wrote a letter, and then your co-pilot censored it to make sure he wasn't saying anything.
right.
And then it was turned in and photographed and mailed back over here by Kodak. Then they developed it and sent it to the parent.
So this
So
was
there wasn't.
letter mail.
We didn't have hand mail.
Ah.
Now the ground troops probably did.
Right. Yeah. Maybe this was a ground troop issue. Because I had someone come up to me recently at church, actually, and talk about her grandfather, who had been in the war, complained about that.
Well, mail was the most important
letters and
thing we
things.
had
Yeah.
to look forward to.
Yeah.
But what we wrote back
Was censored.
was censored. So I drew a lot of pictures and things. I got several copies in some of my books.
Is that when you became an artist?
But I always tell the kids I went from V-mail to email.
With a few years.
Moved up the alphabet.
A few years in between.
Moved up the alphabet. And they understand that. I concentrate on talking to youngsters,
Mhm.
kids, and everything I write is written at the 5th to 6th grade level because these stories are very basic and tell very short.
I love that you are talking to young people because, we have been fortunate not to have a really extensive war. Obviously, there have been wars, but nothing like World War II, where almost everybody participated in some way or another. And I think it's really hard to imagine that now.
Oh, yeah.
So it's great that you go out and talk about what that was like.
At home, they participated by rationing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so many things were rationed, gasoline and tires and etc.
Yeah.
And men were deferred, didn't have to go to service as they were farmers to produce food. And so it was a constant. People worry today about the government having too much power. They should have lived back then when the government had all the power.
Ran everything.
We did exactly what we were told to do. We had scrap drives. We saved grease to make gunpowder. It was amazing. And I don't touch too much on that because it's beyond most people. But sacrifice was the name of the game. And my last book, I wrote about the women who had to stay home and take care of the kids, and while their husbands went off to war. And a friend of mine was a high school girl. She had to take care of her sister's little babies while they worked. And things like that that don't come out very often.
I know a lot of women went to work in factories and things too. But the women, now that I'm like the mom of adults, what I always think about is how you got up every day knowing your kid was in terrible danger.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they suffered.
And basically not just your own kid, but all the kids you knew from the
Yeah.
neighborhood, you know.
Well, the women that went to work at the factories benefited from the fact they were so busy they couldn't worry like that.
I bet
But the
they
women
worried
that stayed
anyway.
home.
Yeah, yeah.
It was much more difficult, I think. And they hung the little flag in the window to indicate somebody was in the service. And it was a blue star on a red flag. But if he got killed, then it turned to a gold star. So the memorial we have down on the courthouse plaza at the 120-some young guys who died, that was not put up by anybody but the Gold Star mothers. I cannot find a World War II memorial made by local government.
It was all volunteers, moms.
It was the Gold Star mothers.
I don't know if you saw, I posted today a picture of the Bedford Daily Times Mail from May 8th, 1945. And of course, there's that giant headline about the Nazi surrender, but there are also two smaller headlines that you can see in the picture, one of which has to do with it was a pretty large number. I don't remember exactly how many local men who were still in German prison camps.
Oh, yes.
And then that there were some people whose deaths, I think it was 4, had just recently been reported. So at the same time as we have this great news, okay, the war is over, there were people who all the way up to the end, you know, suffered and in some cases didn't
Well,
make
the
it.
Germans were very, when they captured somebody, they sent information back to the army and told them, we got him. They said, hey, take pictures of him and follow law. They were very careful not to treat prisoners of war like they treated the Jews.
Everybody else, yeah.
And not just the Jews, but they killed the Gypsies and a whole bunch. And so, in that respect, they couldn't really treat us fairly, treat Americans or anybody else fairly, because they didn't have any food either.
Right.
The guards starved and took our Red Cross food. And
Yeah, especially by the end of the
I've
war.
got a dozen stories on POWs that are found. You can't even imagine what those men went through, because the Germans couldn't support the camp, but they wouldn't let you loose. They even moved the camp. They had a death march one year. One winter, they marched the boys all over Germany to avoid being freed. And many of them died. It's called the Black Bread March.
Did your family, after you got back, did they ever tell you about what they thought about while you were gone, or how concerned they were, or
They didn't really have to, because they wrote every day.
you knew? That's good. They kept you informed.
There's for female, you know. That's right.
But I'm thinking that probably wasn't exactly
Wasn't
exactly comforting if you know that they're worried. But
no, you knew that. Well, see, I had the advantage of being 18 in high school, so I had participated in all those scrap drives and everything before.
Oh yeah.
After World War I, before I was drafted, so I knew what was going on at home. I knew about rationing. I knew about everything. I worked in an auto parts store part-time, and I knew just how.
So when did you go to England? What year was that? What month?
That was in my mother's birthday. I boarded to Queen Mary on my mother's birthday,
Oh, wow.
and they were playing the Bedford High School song,
Oh, really?
the Director's March. Oh, I could have died. Marked up that gangplank.
That's not, is that still the school song? I don't know. I didn't go
Well,
to
Bedford
B&M,
High is
so-
no longer here.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know whether they kept that for middle school or not. They may have.
We'll have to ask somebody. So what year was that then?
That was at 44 or 43.
43. So the war still had a couple of years to run.
See, it was I see. I had to back up because I was drafted. I was 18 on June the 12th, and 13th I got my draft notice. In November of it. August I was sworn in. And I was trained for 9 months, and November the next year I was boarding the Queen Mary. They had so many planes over there, they didn't need the plane, they just needed us to replace the crews.
Mm.
Because when a crew finished his required mission, he could come home. Or a lot of them were shot and were killed, injured.
So it had been 25 missions, then it became 35, is what you said, yeah.
Well, at first we were losing the war, so they dropped it to 18 to get the rest of us. Then as we began to win, they said, okay, now you can go 35 because it's safer. It wasn't,
Right.
because Germany had just, we chased them back into Germany, so they were all concentrated. Their flak guns, they pulled all their flak guns back.
Wow.
We had many more flak guns. And that time,
Did anybody ever like come back who had already done their required number of missions, then gone home and
several guys just re-enlisted, signed up for more trips. I mean, they didn't have to, like Ed Charles. His story is in my last book. He actually was in the same group with my future brother-in-law. And 3 guys from Bedford were in the same outfit. And I got their story in my last book. And it was amazing, but he did do extra duty. I mean,
it seems
and
like
some of
once you
them
were
died.
trained,
Some of them died doing that, you know.
right?
There are stories of guys who finished and somebody said, we're short of bombardier. Would you do one more mission? Yeah. And they shot him down.
The last mission.
Stuff like that it's so dramatic. It's
Yeah.
so unbelievable that life was very cheap. Because they were dropping bombs on England all the time, missiles coming at us. We were in a combat zone once we crossed the international water line. The German subs were looking for us. But the Queen Mary was, a big luxury ship converted to troop ship. We slept in hammocks.
So it wasn't that comfy. You weren't in a first class cabin.
Well, the thing I remember, I found Fred Beretta's name carved on the
Fred
handrail.
Beretta, really?
Fred Beretta, the Bedford basketball Purdue man. His name was carved on the handrail. And Mickey Rooney and his USO troop were on the boat and gave us a show. And we got to see him walking around with a little bitty guy with 2 great big guards. He got overseas, and Patton gave him a gold star for him. He earned the bronze star for silver star for entertaining troops in combat zones. He did a lot of work.
I guess that was pretty risky too, even if he wasn't a
wherever
combatant.
you were, something could fall on you any time.
Right.
And explode, of course.
Yes.
Even some accidents. There were lots of accidents.
After you came back, and first of all, how long did it take you to get back to Bedford after May the 8th, 45?
Oh, well, of course, the war in Japan was still going full
Yes.
force. And so they just left us in England for a while. Because I think they knew that they were going to drop an atomic bomb or they were going to invade. You can find a set of plans to invade Japan. Each outfit, where it's going, and how many losses they're figured, and everything. That whole complete plan to invade Japan.
Wow.
Millions would die on both. killing both sides. So Truman knew that he could do it that way and kill thousands of Americans, or he could drop that bomb. And they dropped the bomb. And the world went crazy. Oh, they'll never recover. Today, that city did twice as good as Chicago. Beautiful cities, both of them, the ones that were bombed. They did recover.
So then when did you finally get out of England?
Out of England in May, it was almost 2 months, May the 8th to July the 7th.
July the 7th.
We loaded all our B-17s up, because Japan was still fighting, and we loaded all our B-17s up. We took the crew with us, the ground crew, 10 mechanics, and 10 of the crew, all of our baggage, without bombs and ammunition and et cetera, no guns. We could fly easily. So we went from England to July the 7th, we waved goodbye to the people that died and flew to Wales and then to Iceland, and over Greenland to Labrador.
So you flew the actual planes back?
Yeah, we flew
brought them back?
because they thought they might need them.
Right.
Now, they left a ton of them in England to tear up, junk, but we took the good ones back, the airworthy ones. The B-17 would suddenly get unairworthy after so many thousand miles. You could only doctor that thing up so long. I think the longest plane flew about 100 missions. But you see, each mission was a long flight.
Yeah. So then how long was that trip? Because you couldn't go that far at a time.
No, we laid over each place. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we laid over each place. In fact, we spent a couple of extra days in Iceland because one of the planes had motor problems. So we got
that's not good
to tour Iceland, which is nothing.
Volcanoes, I think.
A lot of rocks. And
they don't call it Iceland for nothing.
We went to a little village and didn't go in the village. We just walked over the hill and looked down. And somebody said, well, maybe we better not go. Turned out that they were on the German side during the war.
Really?
So many of them, so many sympathizers.
Wow.
I don't know.
So that 2 months between May and July, what did you guys do?
Oh, we just had a ball.
Did you?
Baseball teams and passes to London or any place I wanted to go. And the trains, the little London train, the English trains, you could just walk down to Dis, which was that's where our pub was.
Yeah, it's 5 miles, right?
And we could catch the train there. And, off we go. The idiosyncrasies of the coincidences of boarding Queen Mary on my mother's birthday and landing in Scotland 6 days later, up the Firth of Clyde. Clyde was my dad's name.
Really?
So we had 3 different coincidences. My life has been filled with those things.
Some kind of special connection to what was going on. I should let Brad ask a few questions. I could do this all day. I have a ton more, but
we're moving right along here.
I don't want to be, greedy.
So when you were in England, you talked about some of the famous people like Mickey Rooney. Did you ever meet Clark Gable or Jimmy Stewart? I know they were in the 8th Air Force as well.
They served earlier, I think.
Earlier than you did?
They got their service, and they did what they wanted to do. Stewart stayed. Gable only flew 6 missions. The reason the Memphis Belle made the big headline is because a Hollywood photographer was flying missions with them to get these celebrities. And so he flew enough missions on the Memphis Belle that he had this footage. And so when he made the film, it was actual. Now the remake of Masters of the Air was all...
Was the Memphis Belle the first aircraft?
No, there was another one called Hell's Angels.
That was the first one to complete the 25?
They all tied. There were several that tied.
Tied?
They just picked the Memphis Belle. But the Hell's Angels, the name didn't fit,
That's true.
Back in those days, everybody was very religious. The war was on, everybody had somebody in danger, and churches were full.
A lot of people praying for a lot of
Oh, yeah.
other people.
Yeah.
when you got back here, how long did it take you to feel normal, like to sort of get your life back to something normal?
You know, people ask that. It never bothered me a bit. I've always just been adjusted to where I've been.
Yeah.
And so when I came back, my biggest joy was they discharged us at Bear Field. And the guy in the service line was serving KP, was a guy who had been with us in radio school and bragged that he was not going to go overseas. He was going to flunk radio school. And so there he was serving KP, and I was going home. That was my reward.
Did you give him a hard
And
time?
they gave us a bus ticket and $300, and we came back to Bedford. And I went right back to work at Bill's Auto Store.
Yeah.
Not a high school graduate, but I worked there for 16 years part-time. I even worked there after I taught. But no, I just adjusted back to Bill's Auto, and all the ration stuff was still on. They weren't making any new cars or anything. And so,
It probably helped that you could go back to something
well, I
you
just
already
decided.
knew how to do.
Well,
right?
after about a couple of months, I decided I was going to IU.
Yeah.
I wanted to go to art school at John Herron, but it was too far from Bedford. I was
Yeah.
a homeboy. So I went to IU for one semester. I stayed up there, and then from then on, I commuted.
I can relate. I did the same thing.
I could commute much easier.
Yeah.
And I could work here and commute there.
You talked about the trains. Which depot, was it the Monon Depot that the service members went out from Bedford, or was it the Milwaukee Depot as well?
All railroads were in full use, either with war material or with troop trains. And they were crowded. We traveled on some of the most beat up trains you ever saw. One of them had a sign, "Don't shoot the buffalo from this window." We always said that. But you never, on a troop train, you never had a bed. You just slept on a chair or sideways, or we piled our luggage or duffel bags in the back, and we'd
That had to
sleep
be
on those.
really uncomfortable.
We never had a Pullman car because you couldn't. And it was,
So which Monon did you leave on Monon or Milwaukee when
no,
you,
I left on the Greyhound.
the Greyhound?
Now,
Didn't even
now
have to
Did you
take.
that
went-
story, when they drafted this, it's worse than at Louisville. Let us come home for a while. Then we loaded the bus and went, 19 of us went to 15. Anyway, we got on the Greyhound, drove past Bedford High School. It was in session. We waved. I didn't graduate. and off I went, and we went to Fort Harrison. They said, "Send your civvies home." Well, I just had ordinary clothes, and I just threw them away. But
They didn't let you keep
we got everything
civilian
up there.
clothes.
you didn't need anything. You didn't have any use for anything.
Just wore your
You
uniform
got
all
all
the
new
time.
clothes. My first suit I ever had in my life was an Army uniform.
Yeah.
My first suit.
Did-
And that was the way for most of us.
Did you do your basic at Fort Benjamin Harrison then?
Oh no, they shipped us on I volunteered for the Air Force because I was in the infantry, and I said they worked us in sodding and planting trees and doing this and everything. And this little sign was up on the barracks one day: volunteer for the Air Force. They were losing so many men that they would take anybody. So I volunteered for the Air Cadets. That is a story in itself. And I went to, and a bunch of us volunteered for Air Cadets. They shipped us off to Amarillo, Texas in August.
That emblem on your ring is the same emblem we had in Air Training Command
Yeah.
when I went in the Air Force in
It's a
'79.
propeller. It's a propeller with wings.
Right, Air
And,
Training Command.
I bought the ring in Amarillo, and they flunked us out. I bought it about 2 weeks before they flunked us out. So then it became my lucky ring, and I flew with it. It's been on my finger all my missions. It was my lucky ring. So when I came home a couple of years later, I met my wife, and I was going to school at $98 a month on the GI Bill.
Those were the
And they
days.
said, well, of course, they paid all the tuition. And so we got married, and she said, we can't afford a ring. And we agreed I couldn't afford a ring for me. We got to afford a ring for her. So this became my wedding ring. So this is, I've worn this since I was 18. And my story about that will probably never be published, but I'll put it on Facebook. for our anniversary is coming up May the 23rd.
May the 23rd.
Love story.
What year were you married, Lee?
48.
48.
47.
47?
So you
40.
waited a bit.
Hell, I don't remember.
A couple of years after you got back, anyway.
No, it was 40. It was
48.
48. I go home and look it up.
Were you like halfway through IU at that point?
No, I had a year and a half, so.
So,
But her mother was very proud that I was going to be a college graduate. Our wedding reception had 7 people in her mother's apartment. Got married in the preacher's office. That time, the poverty of that time is what I write about in my 2 books that aren't war books. I write about the poverty that the people today could not handle.
even after the war, because I know
Long after the
you've
war.
talked about the Depression.
They
quite a
still
bit.
didn't make new cars for a couple of years, and they still didn't have rubber tires and rubber sugar and etc. So you had you had rationing for quite a while, but you didn't have jobs. There were still no jobs. The bone mills hadn't converted factories,
Mhm.
and the automobile industry hadn't started yet, and the washing machines and etc. Once they started, then everybody was working. By the time I was teaching, everybody was working and having the baby boom.
But you were able to go back to work right after you got back, so that was
Yeah, I had
different
that
from
Bill's
a lot of
Auto
people.
Store. Well, $6, about $1 an hour, $1 an hour. If I hadn't been for the $90, I wouldn't. Of course, when I got married, they gave us another $15 for June, and then we had a little girl, and they gave us another $15. Then we had another little girl, and they said, "Forget it."
no, you're not getting any more for that. How long did it? Well, first of all, how did you handle your commute? Because you commuted to Bloomington.
I had to
back,
buy a
right?
car.
So you drove. Every
I bought an
day.
old. See, used cars were at a premium.
I bet
They were
yeah.
something. They hadn't made any cars for the entire war. They made them for the Army and the Navy, etc. But we did around here. My first car was a '35 Chevy. I think I had to pay $300 for it. But it was just a junker. And everything I bought, I finally went down to Model A's. They were the best.
Right.
A little bitty motor like that.
That's what my dad said too.
But they were good.
Were they
Yeah,
cheap?
but I bought one and hauled people. They could ride there. I could haul all week for 50 cents because gas was so cheap,
Mhm. Wow.
and I was going anyway.
And you took people with you.
So and we all went out we packed our lunch. We were all married. We were all living in like I live. We had to move in with a man who was divorced and had a full house of furniture, and he gave us 1 bedroom. And we shared the house, the kitchen, and everything. He kept his here, we're here, and we kept ours over there. And the rent nearly got us because it was $15 a month.
How long did you stay there?
Well, we had to stay there till I started teaching.
So
See, I went through teaching, come out and couldn't get a job. But there weren't any kids.
right,
I was an elementary teacher.
school age kids had.
So I sold
come along
used
yet.
cars. I worked for the Times Mail a year on the classified ads.
Mhm.
And I got fired because I wasn't doing that. I just hated it.
Yeah.
I had to go out every day and sell some merchant, put this ad in the paper
Right.
for a little bit of money. Well, it ran 3 days and suddenly you had to go back to him. And it got embarrassing, you know. But it was the best way to add the one ad to it. Everybody read the classified ads. And, but I just didn't like it. And when Riley fired me, and I went up to Hildebrand Motors and sold used cars. There weren't any,
I was
if
going
you-
to say, did
you
they
couldn't
have
even
any
get
cars?
a new car. You had to have your name on the list for a new car.
Yeah.
But used cars were going great guns, and so that was my extra income plus Bill's Auto, and it just worked. And we were babysitting. We kept a little girl. The day we got married, we took over a little girl, a little 4-year-old girl. her daddy had been killed in service,
Oh.
and her mother's mother was keeping the little girl, but she got ill, and so we took her. She paid us $15 a week or something. Keep that kid 24 hours a day.
Mhm.
She only took her on weekends. So that was you did what you had to do to survive. And a lot of my friends were living in converted garages. And one guy lived in a converted chicken house.
That's why there's so many houses built in the late 40s,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. We would just,
Yeah.
well, the catalogs were selling them. Sears and Montgomery were selling houses at very reasonable prices.
Should had to have land.
And the land was, I mean, there were no problem getting a lot in those days.
You know, it had never occurred to me till you said that before the baby boom, there was a baby bust,
Yeah.
right? During the war, the birth rate had to have plummeted.
Well, in 1950, I had a contract in the county at Olytic. I was going to coach basketball. I should never have taken it because I didn't know a thing about basketball. They would have killed me.
You were tall.
But-
You had that.
The superintendent at Bedford interfered and said, "Hey, we need you here, and we'll give you a couple $100 more." So I signed a contract for $2,200 to teach 180 days in Bedford. Went back to Lincoln, my elementary school,
Mhm.
taught with some of my teachers,
Wow.
replaced my principal, and stayed there 15 years. And then I went to the ad building for 12 years during Reconstruction. And then I went back. I decided that we mutually agreed that I wasn't really needed. And so I went back to being a principal as a talker. Happiest 10 years.
Really?
My happiest year were with the kids and not the salesman and
Right.
school board.
You were a born teacher, actually. You
Yeah,
liked
right.
children.
That's what I do now.
Yeah.
I consider this an expensive hobby. You print a book for $800. They sell it back to you for 10. You try to sell it for 20. If you do the figures, it's an expensive hobby.
You're back to
I
working
love
for
doing it.
$1 an hour.
I love doing it. And as you can tell, I can talk for hours.
We like that. I don't know how long we get to talk here, but I could listen for hours. So you didn't have any PTSD, or anything like that, where the war came back to you later.
Didn't
And
bother me a bit.
Didn't bother you a bit.
I prayed and dreaded it and prayed all the time I was in the combat zone
Mhm.
because they had the guided missiles would come over, unguided, and they just explode wherever they wanted to. And then the rockets went up and came down. And then once the great occasion to be a German bomber come over, but we put a stop to that. Yeah, our troops moved pretty fast in '44. And they were in France, and then Hitler invaded Belgium, so we had the Battle of the Bulge. We were in all that. On Christmas Eve of '44, we flew the biggest mission ever been flown. We just wiped them out on Christmas Eve. But we always said they asked for it. But when you study and interview people, you can get, like there's a fellow here in town that I bombed Berlin where he lives. Hein Toulouse.
Oh, Hein, yeah.
And Hein tells us, he's always yelling, "That's the guy tried to kill me." But he gave me some wonderful stories from his point of view.
What was happening on the ground at the
Yeah,
same
being
time.
in that apartment house. And he even gave me one about the Russian troops coming in and marching all the men, German men, able-bodied men, right to Russia, right down the street and out of town. And the Russian soldiers were really kind to the kids. But they took those men and
Yeah.
took them out. So he gave me a couple of real good stories.
Did you meet
And we're
Robert?
friends. He got even with me. He sent all 8 of his kids to me, all 6 of his kids to me
When you were a
at Stark.
teacher or a principal? Did you meet Robert Thrasher? He wrote a book called Popcorn Road to Paris and Back.
No,
We sold it. He's passed now, but We sold it at the museum.
I
for a
think we
while.
exchanged emails a time or two, but I don't think I ever met him.
Because he talked about on Christmas Eve, he was the infantry, and he was out someplace with a small unit where the German kids, said that we were all kids, and the American kids celebrated Christmas Eve and then went back to fighting each other the next day, which I
Well,
thought was really
We had a
interesting.
big party for all the English kids. The English kids could run through the base at certain times
Yeah.
in restricted areas. We had an English boy that ran all the errands for us. His mother did all of our laundry.
Oh, nice.
And that was, you couldn't help but interact with them.
Yeah.
Because we were just in the middle of their field.
Were there a lot of romances between the
Oh,
American?
yeah, a lot of guys got married.
Yeah.
A lot of guys just moved in with a married woman and a kid or two. And he'd just move in with them. And when he got a pass, he'd go in and take a bunch of food and help them out. And while their husband was someplace else. But a lot of married people did come back, and there were a lot of very successful stories and a lot of very sad stories about how that revolved. And it always happens. It happens in
Right.
the Pacific area too, especially the Philippines.
Well, then we're still sorting that stuff out from Vietnam.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's been a long time.
I just, my friend that works in Korea now, Sam Kosovo, I talked with him this week before he
Yeah.
went back.
Yeah.
Foreign countries are just a different breed. We were not used to that.
Sure. Yeah.
We're getting close anymore.
The culture's different, and you need to know where you are. Now, England was probably not that much different, was it, to what you were used to?
No, they were the best people you could possibly think about.
Mm-hmm.
They were all very, very nice to you. They were very, very, well, they were just appreciative because we were saving their skin.
Right. And they'd been at war a long
They
time.
called it
already.
Little America, because we were all there and their men were all someplace else
Yeah.
fighting.
When did World War II start for the Brits? 37, 38? It was
Oh,
really,
no,
it
it
was
started
really
way
early,
back.
right?
September 1st, 1939 was when Hitler
39.
invaded Poland. And I believe it was maybe 2 days later that the British declared war because Poland was the red line.
So 39.
39. September 1st, 39 is when Hitler invaded Poland. And that was when it was determined that
Yeah,
Germany had crossed the red line, so to speak.
you had the Battle of Britain, which we ignored. We sent them a lot of money and a lot of funds. We wouldn't get in. We wouldn't get in until Pearl Harbor happened.
Right.
That was Lend-Lease, where we
Yeah.
And then after Pearl Harbor, it took a while to get everything together to get troops over there, right? When
But
did
we
the
had
first?
nothing. We weren't prepared. If it hadn't been for the CCCs, we wouldn't have had anybody. But see, he trained all these young men during the Depression. He trained them like an army. They lived over here at First Spring Mill. They had a captain and they had officers, and
That was kind of
it was Roosevelt's secret army.
And CCC, what Lee's talking about during the Great Depression, was the Civilian Conservation Corps. We've even got some structures here in Bedford that were built by these
Yeah.
young men.
and there were 2 units out at Spring
Well, the
Hill.
WPA built everything.
Yeah.
WPA built Otis Park and
Correct.
several different park buildings around town. But that is what I was going to. That's in my new book, which I'll never publish. But we were 2,400 people unemployed right here in Lawrence County. We were the poorest county in the state. And so when they started, old man Otis left his farm, decided to buy the golf course and make a memorial for his family. And, the mayor, Dot Murray, was the first to get in line, and he got one of the very first WPA grants, $180,000, to start the ball rolling. And so all of a sudden, men who had been looking for work at $1 a day were earning $1.50 a day. And so we suddenly,
It's double.
my dad raised 3 kids on $48 a month. Yeah. $1.50 an hour. We lived on that until the war, until Pearl Harbor started. And that's why the Depression hit us late, because we had stone contracts all over the nation. We built buildings everywhere. Capital, Lincoln, Nebraska. I went through there and I said, made by Bedford limestone. I couldn't believe it.
Was that in the 30s or was that earlier?
All the stone mansions, Biltmore and all those.
Yeah.
Empire State Building.
Pentagon.
That was why the Depression was a little bit late hitting us. But when those contracts ran out,
Yeah, there was
there
nothing.
was no work.
A lot of people left, right?
Well, they left, yeah. We
Yeah.
were in, I tell them, we were an international city. Dutchtown is still
hmm
have memories of of all
Right.
these areas.
Well, that neighborhood where Lincoln is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So many.
Italian church, the Catholic Church, the Italians, the Germans.
hmm
It was the German Methodist Church when I was a kid.
A lot of our stone carvers that moved into the area were from Italy.
Yeah, yeah.
The Arena family comes to
very-
mind.
Yeah, some of them stayed, but a lot of them left. We had an event a few years ago at well, it was not at Reed Station because you can't get to Reed Station, but it was at the Avoca, what was the fish hatchery. And we did have, because it was about the Italian community that lived at Reed Station. They were all
Oh.
mostly stone workers and small business people. Anyway, we had a lot of the descendants from those families who bought tickets and came back, which was so cool to
Mhm.
see them. And, there were little family reunions all over the porch of that house out there at the fish hatchery. It was
Oh,
really fun to see how many memories they still had, even though, it had been a long time since any
I
of them
found a
lived
house
there.
in Dutchtown next to Inder's Grocery. It's probably the oldest house in Bedford. And I wish somebody would, 1718 G Street. I wish somebody would dig into it, go get the deed and et cetera, and trace it back. And I think it used to be a school.
Huh.
I think it preceded Lincoln School.
Well, send me that address and I'll look into it. Yeah, it would be interesting. What makes you think it's really
Big
old?
way it's constructed, big blocks of stone
Yeah.
and everything.
Was it really old when you lived in that area
Yeah.
already? Yeah.
Well, I didn't notice everything was old and beat up when I lived there.
But some places
We didn't know what a new house looked like.
look different because of the way they're built. I
Yeah.
have a thing for houses that have
Well,
at least two chimneys.
This thing fits. I'm not an
Yeah.
architect, but it fits all the descriptions of a man-made, handmade building.
And send me the address. I'd be interested
It's
in looking at it.
1718 G Street.
How old do you think it is?
Well, it's a lot older than I am. It was there when I was a kid.
Well, that's saying something.
I would say it dates back almost. I would say it dates over 150 years,
Wow.
maybe 200.
So like Civil War. or
Because you
before?
don't build houses with blocks of stone anymore.
Okay, if it's that old,
And
we
without
should
foundation,
Yeah.
the foundation was a block of stone.
we should be able to figure it out.
All you need, there's someplace there should be.
Maybe the surveyor's office would have it.
Yeah.
Well, the deeds tell you can trace a deed all the way back.
Somebody paid taxes on it all this time. So there must
That's
be
true.
a deed somewhere.
I remember years ago going backward in time for our farm, our family farm. You can trace the ownership all the way back because
yeah,
the
you
county
can.
still has all those records. It's
I
amazing.
traced my farm back to the Civil War.
Yeah.
And he's buried there.
The thing about an address is the address has changed, so
Yeah,
you-
yeah, it might may.
you kind of have to start at the present day and work your way back and get lucky. But
Well, Lee, you want to show us some of your medals that you received for your service in the military?
Well, I didn't. The only medal I really got, I mean, everybody got serving in Europe medal, good conduct medal, etc. Most everybody, but I got the air medal 3 times, and it was.
which one is the air medal?
But the air medal is this one with the gold on here.
Mhm.
I got that. and the Paul Harris Award. No, I got that air medal 3 times because if you finish 6 missions, you beat the odds. Because the odds were you wouldn't make 6 missions.
Really?
And
Really?
so if you finish the 6 missions, you got an air medal. And then if you finished another 6, you got a little thing on you got another air medal, which is you got to put a clover on the ribbon for this one. And I've got 2 of them on there. Yeah. Anyway, so that was the way it worked.
Yeah, just you can point it at the camera there. Where
Oh yeah,
I see it. I see the good
I
conduct
wanted to see
medal.
what it was. But I got 2 sets of wings because you had gunner's wings with the flying bullet. But then if you really served, you got was a crew member's wing, which was a round circle, a round deal with to indicate that you were on a crew. You actually did missions. So a lot of guys went to gunnery school and never got a mission in. You had to be a little special to be accepted on a crew. The pilot was the pure ruler, just like the captain of a ship, and he could deny or kick off anybody he wanted, or accept anybody he wanted, or refuse to accept anybody he wanted. But the idea was that if you weren't on the ball, you weren't accomplished, nobody particularly wanted you. And then it got so desperate they took everybody, of course, because we had 6 gunners on each plane. And I was a radio operator. I sat there and I had to monitor the radio because we were a lead crew. We flew 12 planes here and 12 planes here and 12 planes down here so we could drop our bombs at the same time. But each squadron of 12 had a lead crew and with a radar dome instead of a ball turret gun. And by that gunner usually set up his nose. We flew over without a bombardier a lot of the time because we knew where we were going. Flew without the bombardier because anybody could set up the bomb site and drop the bomb, open the door and drop the bomb. So we had a toggle layer, we call it. He only did it, set it up and flip a toggle. When the guy ahead did it. When our lead plane dropped the planes, the 11 planes behind us dropped their bombs too. So you had to have a bombardier in the couple of planes up front, but the guys in back just let it go. So they were toggle layers. And that's not common knowledge, but that's what happened. And,
How many pilots did you work with?
I just had the one.
The one, the whole time? That was good.
Our crew was exceptional, actually. He was halfway through law school, and he was a hot rod pilot. He could just fly that thing anyway. We flew under a bridge one time.
Oh my gosh.
Up in Scotland. We did a lot of flying to check out the plane to make sure it was in perfect condition and make sure that radar dome was perfect, because we always had a command pilot. The command pilot took the seat of the co-pilot, and they stuck the co-pilot back in the tail gun position.
Oh my.
So we lost the ball turret gunner, we lost our tail gunner after crew training, after we got over there and made a lead crew. It took those 2 guys off, and they had to serve on other ships. One of them got killed. Actually, he was murdered right at the end of the war. He parachuted into a Nazi training camp, and they murdered everybody captured. They captured 9, I think, murdered them all, and hid their bodies in a pond, and they weren't discovered for a year. It's a great story. But anyway, that's what happened. Is the command pilot was usually a captain or a major. Sometimes the colonel would go with us. We never knew who was up front. We sat behind the bomb bay, and the cabin was up front, of course. You had the pilot and the command pilot and a gunner who ran the top turret. He was the engineer. If a plane got in trouble, this kid, it's a staff sergeant, he was a mechanic, and he was supposed to figure out what happened. On the very first mission, that's what happened to us. But anyway, to finish the first story, the command pilot, command navigator, and command bombardier, we we were leaders, so we had to have all the pros. And so we were back behind. But first 4 missions, the pilots had an agreement that they would, it was understood that the guys that had in the most missions got the best positions because their time was running out.
Right.
And so the lead pilots, the guys up front, got the best planes. And our first mission on December the 5th, 1944, they gave us an old beat up plane and they put us in the very rear. We were tail end Charlie. The other name was Coffin Corner because fighters could come up under and get you. The further back you were, you didn't have the protection of the other.
You could get
11
picked
guys.
off.
Yeah, you get picked off.
Yeah.
And so we flew that mission, and then and our motor started acting up because they gave us this beat up plane. And we started dropping back behind the formation, and of course our target was Berlin. Very first mission, Berlin.
Big target.
And we were tail end Charlie, and the motor started choking out. Well, the little engineer, the guy my age, the mechanic, figured out a way to switch the gas from one tank to the other and got it back, and we kept creeping back up. So the time we bombed Berlin, got Heinz house. and
Terrorized
came
Hein.
back, because that was very expensive. That was a very expensive mission. But they broke us in that way. And all the good guys had the good planes up front.
But it sounds like
and
the
we
guy
had just qualified. You had to qualify to fly in formation. When we got over there, we had flown in combat. We'd flown several hundred hours up there in Sioux City, Iowa. We got over there, that was forgotten. You guys are going to learn to fly combat because we fly very close together, and we don't want any yahoos up here
right.
crashing into us. We had there were a lot of mid-air collisions. I was in one in our training mission. I was in an air collision. I saw it below me happen. I saw it happen below me. But anyway, these guys. So after that first mission, we made it. Got back home, and our pilot was being a lawyer. He was right. Why did why do we get this? Why do we get this so and so? And the very next day, they gave us another old plane, and we were going on another mission. And they got about halfway across the North Sea. It started acting up. He just got on the intercom and said, "Boys, if you want to vote, I say we turn back. The crate not going to make it." And the little mechanic agreed with him, of course. So we turned back. We aborted. An abortion is a high-level suspicion. Think you might be a coward and don't want to go.
Right.
So when we landed, they met us, a major and the MP, and his whole body, whole group of squad, and they grilled those officers mercilessly, and they tested that plane. They tested, everybody agreed that plane would not have made it. So we could have died on that mission too.
Right.
So you had to give credit to this. I always gave credit to Bill Templeton because he had the guts to abort.
Is that the pilot?
Yeah, Bill Templeton. He ended up as clerk of the Supreme Court of Connecticut.
Excellent. So he did well.
And our navigator ended up as an architect, and our co-pilot ended up as a doctor. And one of the gunners became a millionaire dentist in Kansas City. One was selling race tires for Sears. And I was teaching school for 2,000 something.
You guys did okay. You did okay. What happened to the mechanic? That was the guy who got you through the first mission, right?
Well, when their mechanics checked it out, we couldn't even leave the plane until, and so they let the crew leave, but they wouldn't let the officers leave, and they went down and tested that plane, and it was fine. And well, nobody could be blamed because the war-weary planes, engines wear out, turbos wear out, etc. Gas lines can stop, oil lines can stop. But he was just smart enough to say, "I'm not doing it." He had enough spunk, and he had enough legal training to know
Yeah.
that he had a leg to stand on. He was going to, he and later on we had another crew we knew about. They went ahead and they were down. The war warrior planes were a big problem. The guys on the ground could do everything they could do. They changed motors. They could do anything. Out in the cold, we didn't have hangars. Had one big hangar per field. Everything else was done outside.
And
But
you just went over.
mid-air collision I was in, we were training new guys who just come in. We were training them to fly formation. One guy just came up out of the other, and that was it. They both went down. Luckily, we were on top. You could look out and see, but you didn't have to worry about anything falling down on you.
And you just went over all the success stories of just one particular crew on one particular bomber, and that's a good testimony to why you fellas and the ladies working back here was called the greatest generation. You have some
Well,
awards too.
The thing of it was, we didn't have any. We were raised with discipline. Our generation, Dad would beat me with a belt. If I did something wrong, he'd take his belt off and whip me. Mom would use a peach tree limb and make you go get it. Make you go get it. Go out there to get that limb off that tree. So we were disciplined. We knew that when somebody older said, "Do it," I've had neighbors whip me. They had the right to whip me. You were taught to be a citizen. You were taught. We were dragged to Sunday school and churches, and we had churches that had churches all over town. They'd fly out, and everybody wanted to make sure you were raised. The purpose of, I get off on that. The purpose of schools is to teach civilization as you want them to continue it. And so they taught us discipline. They taught us the 3 R's, and there wasn't any argument and any great deal about anything. You did what you were told. So when we went into service, it was no problem to mind the corporal or the sergeant. And if you complained, he'd say, "Go see the chaplain." And that's all that was the answer that you got. And it was, so it just, the greatest generation was, the answer there was discipline, as far as I'm concerned. We knew what we had to do, and we knew what was expected of you. And everybody knew what you were capable of. I mean, they would judge you. It was a different time, different place.
Well, also you had everybody involved in the war effort. It wasn't just whoever volunteered.
Oh,
You,
no.
like you
they
talked
weren't
about your bomber crew.
volunteer for.
Yeah, those guys, that level of people would not normally be in the military in those large numbers. Like your
No.
architect and your lawyer and those guys. So
No.
it was
Everybody went.
hugely representative of the entire country.
You had a draft board in each town or area, and they decided who went. I appealed to the draft board. Dad approved of the draft board, wanted me to finish high school. But finishing high school in 1943 was a great thing. A high school diploma was equal to
Right. Not everybody
much more
did
than
it.
it is now. It's just high. I've got 3 degrees from IU. I'd sell any of them.
What do you think? What percentage of people finished high school then?
Well, the common knowledge was you just drop out when you're 16 and go work on a farm.
Yeah.
But there aren't any farms now. Those jobs are all gone.
Right. Yeah.
You could work in an electrician's shop or an auto mechanic. You could say, "I'm going down to help old John was in the shade tree there with his mechanics."
Yeah.
Now men can't work on cars.
Not
You have
without
to have
specialized
a
training.
computer. You have to have everything. So we've eliminated, our society has eliminated the way I lived. It's eliminated.
Yeah, definitely those jobs that you could do without.
There are no jobs that you can do
special
without
training
education
or
and special
education.
training. And they still tell these kids to study the atmosphere and the flowers and the bees and the dinosaurs and all that. But what you need to do is go to Ivy Tech and learn to do something. Or go to the vocational school and learn to do something.
Let's talk real quick before we close out about some of the civilian awards you've received here over the years. You have a Sagamore the Wabash,
Oh, I got they're listed on your chart.
right?
Yep.
I just go through that chart. You can ask me if anything you want. But to start the first. The first award I got was Becky Skillman. I met her at a Memorial Day ceremony and got my picture taken with her. And I was off on selling my first book.
Okay.
And then later, Brent Steele said, I'll take you up to the legislature. So he took me up to the Senate, and they honored me, and Becky was lieutenant governor, ruling the Senate. No, so she was again. And Eric Cook jumped on the wagon and took me to the House. The Senate wouldn't let me speak. Becky said, hi, Lee, as I went out. But at the House, they let me speak a little bit, say a few things. And so that was my first thing. And then they gave me an award from the Senate, an award from the House. And then they gave me a combined award from the General Assembly. And then Governor Holcomb came to the public Republican meeting here in the Armory one year, and he gave me the Sagamore the Wabash personally. He handed it. And I even got his picture with me promoting the book. I got a picture of him holding on Leatherwood Creek. And
I think I
later
snapped that picture for you that night.
he gave me another one. Yeah, and later, just last year, or 2 years ago, at that Rotary Roast, Eric Cook brought Governor Holcomb's Circle of Wabash,
Yeah, Circle Court in.
Yeah,
I was just
Circle
looking at
of
that.
Corridon.
Yeah.
which is even more higher. And then WIW said, well, I'm the only guy in the state that's got all those awards.
That's correct.
I don't know if it's true or not, but I guess it is. It may have changed lately. But see, I've been recognized by those people. Like on Leatherwood Creek was approved by Pence's wife, who ran that committee on the Centennial.
The bicentennial. Yeah.
They approved that book on Leatherwood Creek because it's history. It's pure history.
And then 10 years ago, you were Grand Marshal of
I
the
forgot that.
4th of July parade, and you rode with the future vice president.
Yeah,
at that time.
Pence, I asked Pence if he'd ride with me, and he jumped on. He said, "Yeah." He'd been to Orleans or someplace. He jumped on the we rode. That was a thrill to ride with him. So, but my stories are not war. My stories are human interest, or what really happened to people as they rode them. So many of my, Maria Edwards, Norman Taylor. We did all those World War II veterans out at the high school on TV.
Yeah, it's great.
Wonderful. That's where I got so much material. And other people started sending me their stories. And I interviewed several guys after that, just like we were doing for the Vietnam vets. And it's important to me to preserve history and to tell people about it. You can't just do it and put it on a shelf someplace. And so I do this silly old man bit of sitting at Walmart and selling books. And people laugh at me.
Who laughs at you?
Well, I think
You-
I worry about it a little bit, but I said, what else am I going to do? I don't have any friends to talk to, any old friends to talk to.
That's true.
And, so I made a lot of new friends, and that's the way I meet the kids a lot of time. I've spoken at Springville School a couple of times. The schools out here, I used to speak to a lot of area schools. Then I said, well, I've got 7 different interviews on Facebook, on True YouTube, and a couple on Vimeo. And if you want to hear me talk, just tune it in and let the kids see it on. I can't run out there all the time.
Well, I want to thank you for being such a contributing member to the community for all these years. Looking forward to working with you. I'll see you tomorrow at the committee meeting for the Semiquincentennial. It's great to have you on there contributing. Rowena, do you have
Yeah.
any further questions for Lee?
No,
Yeah.
just thanks for all the stuff that you do, to educate all of us, the young and the,
Yeah.
I guess I could call myself the old, or maybe I'll just call myself the not young, but we're all,
Well,
we're
the
all
thing
able
of
to
it-
learn.
yeah, the thing of it is, if you don't offer the opportunity, then I tell my people that pass by, I say you can buy history for 40 or stories for $20, or you can go to McDonald's. You can get fat
the
or
same
get learn,
amount,
or
that's
you
true.
can learn or get fat.
And if you got $40, you can do both, learn and get fed.
Well, my pet books do real well.
Do they? Better than the war books.
Well, it continues the autobiography
Yeah.
of Leatherwood Creek. It tells about my wife and I and how we bought houses and bought houses and bought houses. And all my pets, I drew pictures of all my pets. That attracts the kids. And my goal is to encourage reading first, and then the history go with it. I think homeschoolers could use my books because I write this so that they will read it, and it's very short, and that encourages them to read.
And it's here.
And
It
it's
happened here.
and
A lot of it.
several kids are taking advantage of it. And their parents will bring them up, and hand them $20, and they have to buy their own book and everything. I sign it for them. It's great.
Why don't you tell our audience where all they can buy your books if they want to?
Oh, well, besides coming to see me at Kroger and having your picture taken,
Or Walmart.
Or
you're
Walmart?
at Crowder's has set up a table, and they have all my books there already signed. Smoking Jim's has the same thing. They've set them up. The library, the museum has them right here
Yes.
and available. And they're all, some are in Pale at the gift shop there on the circle. And of course, the Christmas when they're open, they sell them at the Christmas shops. And so we do. Inkling Bookstore, they keep 3 copies of all my books, and they keep all local authors.
Mm-hmm.
So any local author that's written a book might be able to place it at Inkling's. And they like to buy it and resell it. Some people just sell it and give me the money. It just works, whatever they do. But those are easy places to buy a signed copy.
So lots of opportunities to buy your books around this area.
And they can always call me. I'm all over Facebook. Out of town people, I charge them an extra $2 for freight. Big money.
You mean if you send them,
I have to mail.
not just for being out of town?
It costs $7. It costs $7 to send a book. Almost $7.
Yeah.
Definitely no profit in that.
No.
Well, Lee, I want to thank you for being on. I want to remind all our viewers that on June 14th, we will be celebrating Lee's 100 years of life at the First Baptist Church. And we're going to be glad to have him speak at that event. And it will be from 1 to 4 p.m. on Saturday, June 14th. Look forward to seeing everybody there. Rowena, thank you for being such
Thank
a
you for
good
letting me
guest
sit in.
host. We appreciate it, truly.
I always like to talk to Lee.
Yeah. And as we close, I want to always thank Joe Voris behind the
Thank you, Joe.
camera for all he does to make the Veterans History Project a reality. Thank you so much, Joe. On behalf of the Lawrence County Museum, I want to say thank you for tuning in, folks, and remind you, if you love your freedom, be sure to thank a veteran.
Thank a
And we'll
veteran.
see you when we see you.